I got a call on a Tuesday afternoon while I was elbow deep in a restoration project at my workshop in Halifax. My phone buzzed on the workbench and I almost ignored it. I was in the middle of stripping old varnish off a 1940s sideboard for a client who needed it back by Friday, and I had sawdust in my hair and mineral spirits on my hands. But something made me pick up. It was my neighbor, Carol. "Leah," she said, and her voice had that careful, tight quality that people use when they're trying not to alarm you. "I don't want to panic you, but there's a moving truck in your driveway. Two guys carrying boxes out. Your mom is standing on your porch directing them." I put down the scraper. "Sorry, can you say that again?" "A moving truck. Your mom is there. She looks like she knows what she's doing, Leah. Like this is planned." I thanked Carol and hung up. I stood there in my workshop for about 30 seconds, looking at the sideboard, thinking, this cannot be what I think it is. My mother didn't have a key to my house. She hadn't had one in 2 years, not since I changed the locks after a boundary conversation that didn't go the way I'd hoped. She didn't know my alarm code. She had no legal connection to my property whatsoever. Except, and this is the part that made my stomach drop, she had, at one point, held a general power of attorney over my affairs. I'd given it to her 4 years ago, when I was going through a rough surgery recovery and needed someone to handle my banking and property-related paperwork while I was laid up. I was 28, alone in Halifax, and the surgery had complications. My mom had flown in from Barrie, Ontario, and I was grateful. At the time, it seemed like the right thing to do. What I hadn't told her, what I hadn't told anyone in my family, was that I'd had that power of attorney formally revoked 18 months ago. I had it notarized, filed, and a written notice sent to the relevant parties. My lawyer had a copy. The land registry office in Halifax had a record. It was done, it was legal, it was final. My mom apparently did not know this. I grabbed my keys. The drive from my workshop to my house in the north end of Halifax is about 12 minutes on a good day. I made it in 9. When I turned onto my street, I could see the white cube truck from half a block away. My coffee table was on my front lawn. My coffee table was on my front lawn. My coffee table. The one I'd bought at an estate sale in Lunenburg and spent 3 weekends refinishing. It was just sitting there on the grass like it was nothing. I parked and got out, and my mom saw me immediately. She didn't flinch. That's the part I keep coming back to. She didn't flinch. She looked me right in the eye and said, "Oh good, you're here. This will be easier." "What is happening?" I said. Not a question. More like I was trying to make my brain accept what my eyes were seeing. "We're liquidating some of your assets," she said. Liquidating. She used that word like she was reading from a financial document. "Your brother needs $80,000 by the end of the month, or things are going to get very bad for him. You have equity in this house. There are things here we can sell quickly. We found a buyer for the sideboard in your living room who'll pay $4,000 cash today." I stared at her. The sideboard in my mom. That's not my sideboard, that's a client's piece. I brought it home to finish the inlay work. "That doesn't even belong to me." She blinked just once. Then she said, "Well, we didn't know that." I don't know how to explain what I felt in that moment. It wasn't just anger, though there was plenty of that. It was something colder. It was the specific feeling of realizing that someone who is supposed to love you has been sitting in a room somewhere, making plans about your life and your belongings, and has not once, not for a single second, considered calling you first. Not to ask, not to warn you, not even to lie to you and give you a chance to respond. She had just decided. "Where did you even get the idea that you have the right to do this?" I asked. She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and produced a folded document. She held it out to me like it was a trump card, like she'd been waiting for this moment. "I have power of attorney," she said. "I've always had it. You signed it yourself." I looked at the document. It was a photocopy of the original, the one I'd signed 4 years ago in that hospital room in Halifax when I could barely sit up straight and was still on heavy pain medication. I looked at it for a long moment. Then I looked at my mother. "Mom," I said, "I need you to stop the movers right now and send them home." I'm not going to do that. I'm asking you to do it. Your brother is in serious trouble, Leah. Real trouble. These are people who don't make empty threats. $80,000 by the 31st, or they start making examples. Do you understand what that means? I did understand. My brother had been gambling for years, not casually, not the hockey pool and the odd scratch ticket that most people do. Seriously. Online poker, sports betting through apps, some private card games that I only heard about secondhand. He'd burned through his own savings, then a line of credit, then apparently had borrowed money from people who were not interested in payment plans. This had been building for at least 3 years. Our parents had bailed him out twice before that I knew of, and God knows how many times I didn't know of. And now they had decided that his problem was my problem. That my house, my belongings, the life I had built entirely on my own in a city where I had no family safety net should be the solution to a debt he had created through choices that had nothing to do with me. Send the movers home, I said again. We're doing what we have to do. No, I said, you're doing what you've decided to do. There's a difference. I walked past her, went inside, and called the movers myself. I told them I was the registered owner of the property and that they were operating without my consent and that if they did not stop immediately, I would be calling Halifax Regional Police to report them for theft and unlawful entry. I don't know what my mother had told them about the arrangement, but the two guys looked at each other, looked at me, looked at the door. One of them made a phone call. 15 minutes later, they started carrying things back in. My mother was furious. She followed me through my own house telling me I was selfish, that family takes care of family, that my brother had been there for me during my recovery, which was partially true and also completely beside the point, and that if I let this happen to him, I would have to live with that for the rest of my life. She said my father agreed with her. She said my aunts and uncle in Barrie had already been told about the situation and they also thought I was being selfish. She said that I'd always been the one who put herself first. I let her talk. I made myself a cup of tea. I stood at my kitchen counter and I let her say all of it because I knew that the conversation I actually needed to have could not happen in this house with moving boxes on my lawn. That night I called my lawyer. Her name is Margaret and she's been handling my affairs since I bought my house 4 years ago. She's the one who filed the revocation. She's the one who has every document. I told her what had happened, and she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, Leah, your mother has committed fraud. What she attempted today, using a revoked power of attorney to authorize the removal of assets from your property, that's not a gray area. We talked for 40 minutes. By the end of it, I had a plan. 3 days later, my parents called a family meeting. This is a thing my family does, has always done. When there's a crisis, particularly one involving my brother, my parents convene what they call a family meeting, which in practice means everyone gathers in my parents' living room in Barrie, listens to my parents explain the problem, and then agrees to help. I had driven the 7 hours from Halifax. I had taken 2 days off work. I sat on the love seat across from my parents and my brother and said nothing while my father laid out the situation. The debt was real. $83,000, to be precise. There was a deadline. There were consequences. My parents had already put $20,000 toward it from their savings, which I genuinely hadn't known. My aunt and uncle had offered $5,000. Everyone was looking at me. My father said, "We know this isn't fair to you, Leah. We know that, but we need you to consider signing the house over as collateral so we can get a line of credit." My brother sat across from me and didn't quite make eye contact. He had the look of someone who had told himself enough stories about a situation that he mostly believed them. He said, "I'm going to pay you back. I've already talked to someone about a consolidation loan. This is temporary." I looked at my father. I said, "Dad, why don't you and Mom put your house up as collateral?" Silence. "You've owned your house in Barrie since 1997, I said. "It's worth at least $600,000, probably more. You have significant equity. If this is a family emergency, why is my asset the one on the table?" My mother said, "That's our retirement." "My house," I said, is also my retirement. It's also my only asset. It's also the thing I've spent 6 years paying off on a single income in one of the most expensive housing markets in Atlantic Canada. But somehow that's the one we're liquidating. My aunt started to say something about family obligation. I looked at her. I said, "Are you offering to put your house up?" She stopped talking. My father said, "Leah, we need you to be reasonable." I reached into my bag. I had printed everything out. The original power of attorney dated 4 years ago, the formal revocation dated 18 months ago with a notarization stamp, the lawyer's signature and the file number from the Nova Scotia Land Registry, the written notice that had been sent to all relevant parties, and one more document, a letter from Margaret laying out in plain legal language what my mother had attempted to do 3 days ago, what it constituted under Canadian law, and what our intentions were going forward. I slid it across the coffee table. I watched my father pick it up. I watched him read the first paragraph. I watched his expression change. "The power of attorney you've been operating under," I said, "was revoked 18 months ago. What happened at my house on Tuesday was not authorized. The movers were directed to remove my property without my consent, using a document that had no legal standing. My lawyer has already filed a report with the Halifax police. A detective contacted my mother yesterday. Mom, I assume you got that call?" My mother's face had gone very still. "There's a criminal complaint on file," I said. "What happens next depends on how the next few conversations go. But I want to be very clear about something so that everyone in this room understands. My house is not available. My assets are not available. My finances are not available. I did not create this debt. I did not enable this debt, and I am not responsible for this debt." My brother said, "Leah." "I'm not finished," I said. "I love you. I do. And I genuinely hope you find a way through this. I hope you get help, not just for the money, but for the gambling, because the money is not the problem. The gambling is the problem. The gambling is the problem, but I cannot be the solution to it. No version of me putting my house on the line actually solves anything, because if the gambling continues, we'll be back here again in 2 years with a different number." Nobody said anything. My father set the documents down on the coffee table. After a very long silence, he said, "When did you revoke it?" 18 months ago, I said, "after the incident with the bank account." He knew what incident I meant. 2 years ago, my mother had transferred $2,000 out of a joint account we briefly shared during my recovery. Money that was mine, that I put there for a specific purpose, into my brother's account without telling me. When I found out, she said it was an emergency and she'd had the authority to do it. Technically, at that moment, she had. But I had gone to Margaret the following week and started the revocation process. It had taken a few months to complete properly, but it was done. "I tried to tell you at Christmas," I said to my father. "You didn't want to have the conversation." He looked older than I'd seen him look in a long time. I don't say that to be cruel. I say it because it's true, and because I think some part of him had known, for longer than he'd admitted to himself, that something about this arrangement with my brother had been going wrong, that they'd been managing it instead of confronting it, that every bailout had just pushed the reckoning further down the road. My mother said quietly, "We panicked." "I know," I said. "We didn't think." "I know," I said again. I wasn't trying to be cold, but there's a difference between understanding why someone did something and accepting that what they did was okay. I understood completely. I accepted none of it. The weeks after that meeting were hard in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. My brother entered a gambling addiction program in Toronto, not because anyone forced him, but because I think the family meeting cracked something open that had been sealed for a long time. The debt didn't disappear. My parents took out a home equity line of credit on their own property, the thing they'd said they couldn't do, and covered the most urgent portion. The rest is being negotiated. I don't know all the details. I've made a deliberate decision to let my parents manage it because it was always their decision to make and because my involvement had never actually been necessary. The criminal complaint is still technically open. Margaret advised me to leave it that way for now as documentation rather than withdraw it entirely. My mother knows this. We've talked twice since the meeting. Careful, surface level conversations. The kind where you're both checking whether the ground is stable enough to put weight on. It's not warm, but it's not nothing. My brother called me from Toronto about 3 weeks in. He didn't ask for anything. He just said he was sorry and that he knew what he put everyone through and that he was working on it. I told him I was glad he called. I told him to keep going. I meant both of those things. Carol, my neighbor, texted me the day after everything happened to ask if I was okay. I told her I would be. She said she'd called the police herself that Tuesday when she saw the truck, before she even called me, just to have it on record. I hadn't known that. I sent her a bottle of Nova Scotia wine and a note that said thank you, and I meant that too. My workshop is back to normal. The sideboard for the client, not the one the movers almost took. That one is long finished, is a mid-century credenza from an estate in Dartmouth, and it is gorgeous. It has these original brass poles that just needed cleaning, and the wood took the new finish beautifully. I delivered it last Thursday, and the client cried a little in the good way. That is the part of my work I love most. Taking something that someone thought was beyond saving and showing them what it looks like when you put the time in. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. Some things are worth restoring. Some things just need you to know the difference between what's yours to fix and what isn't. There's a credenza in my workshop right now with the most beautiful original brass poles I've seen in years. The previous owners almost had it stripped for parts because they thought it was too far gone. I think about that a lot. I think about it because for a long time, I made the mistake of believing that love meant making yourself available to be stripped for parts too. That if someone you came from needed something badly enough, the decent thing was to give it, even when giving it cost you everything you'd quietly built on your own. I was wrong about that, not wrong about love, wrong about what love actually asks of you. What happened with my mom and my brother didn't come from nowhere. Years of small decisions, each bailout, each transfer, each conversation that ended with someone's problem becoming everyone else's emergency, those things add up. They create a pattern. And patterns, if you don't name them, start to feel like facts. Like this is just how things are. Like this is just who we are to each other. I had let that pattern go unnamed for too long. And the Tuesday afternoon with the moving truck was the moment it finally had a face I couldn't look away from. The revocation wasn't an act of cruelty. I want to be clear about that because I've had to be clear about it to myself more than once. I revoked that power of attorney 18 months ago because I had started to understand something important. That protecting yourself is not the same as abandoning the people you love. That being the person in your family who refuses to be financially destroyed is not selfishness. It is the only way you remain capable of being there at all. You cannot pour from a house that's been emptied. What I'm most proud of, and it took me a while to let myself feel proud rather than just relieved, is that I didn't panic. When Carol called, when I drove those 12 minutes back to my house and saw my coffee table on my lawn, I didn't fall apart. I didn't beg. I didn't make promises I couldn't keep just to make the discomfort stop. I had done the work ahead of time, quietly, without announcing it to anyone, because I had understood at some level that the moment would come. That preparedness, knowing your own documents, knowing your own rights, trusting your own judgment enough to act on it before anyone else forces your hand, that is not cold or calculating. That is what it looks like to take yourself seriously. My brother is in a program now. My parents are working through a hard thing they put off for too long. None of that is resolved, and I'm not pretending it is. But it's moving. Honestly, for the first time, instead of being managed and buried and handed off to whoever is standing closest. I still talk to my mom. It's careful and it's slow, and some days I don't know what we are to each other anymore, but I know what I am to myself. And that turns out to be the thing worth protecting. Some things are worth restoring. The work is figuring out which ones and having the clarity, the courage, and the self-respect to know the difference between what's yours to fix and what isn't.